From courtside of the virtual hardwood, it's the NLSC Podcast, a weekly show for basketball gamers and hardcore hoopheads. This is episode 575. I'm Andrew in our forum, Andrew NLSC on X and Blue Sky. I'm joined as always by my co-host Derek, Deep3 in the forum, and Deep3G and Deep384 on X. Derek, we've got a fascinating question, a fascinating comparison on our minds this week, so please tip us off.
So Andrew and I are trying to decide which game to start a co-op season on, NBA Live 09 or NBA 2K9. This had us revisiting both games today, where we use teams that are potential suitors. However, these sessions had us drawing comparisons between both games. And at the end of the day, Andrew, we decided that we just really liked them both, and we actually might start a season on both games.
Yeah, it's really tempting, isn't it? I've been playing a lot of 2K9 recently. It's going to be one of my Wayback Wednesday features this month. Going to be taking a look back at that with an in-depth retrospective. I've covered NBA Live 09 before. Might have to revisit that because it's a game that I've enjoyed more. The more that we've played it together, and playing 2K9 as well, playing them together, playing them solo, I really appreciate these games more. I wish I'd spent more time with them back in the day. And you said the same thing about Live 09 before we started recording.
Yeah, I think the thing is that both games have their own unique style and pretty different mechanics. Like the ISO motion system with the trigger in 2K9 compared to the right stick dribbling and right stick triple threat in NBA Live 09. And the post game is actually a little bit better on NBA Live 09. The fast breaks probably feel a little bit better on 2K9. There's pros and cons to both games, but both games are incredibly strong from a gameplay and authenticity perspective. Another thing I mentioned to you off air, how about that foot planning in both games? It makes such a big difference, whether it's, being able to come to a full stop, to take a jump shot, being able to, stand your ground in an ISO situation and not be sliding around. Cuts feel more realistic. Fast breaks feel more realistic. I've always said that foot planning is one of the most important pieces from a gameplay perspective in a basketball video game, as far as enjoyment and as far as the, players moving like their real life counterparts. It's just the whole feel, and super strong in both games.
No doubt. And, there have been people that say you can't have great foot planting and responsive controls. You have to sacrifice one or the other. And I'm going to call BS, because you look back at these great games, Derek, they were doing this a couple of generations ago. Good foot planting, and also good play movement, fluid controls, responsive controls. Yeah, I think people are just making excuses for new games, quite frankly.
Yeah, I also want to point something out. Andrew was not playing NBA 2K9 prior to the last couple weeks. And I had suggested that we throw on NBA 2K9 and have a session because we hadn't connected on it before. And I think Andrew's expectations were pretty low, right? Because it's the game right after NBA 2K8, which he is not a big fan of.
Indeed.
So, how can it be that much better, right? So, I want to let our listeners know that Andrew has been loving 2K9, and he hasn't just been connecting with me on it. He's actually been playing many games against the computer. Tell our audience what you like better about NBA 2K9, because I agree with you. NBA 2K9 was high in my rankings. It was actually higher than NBA 2K10. A lot of great memories with that game, and I feel like it is one of their best releases.
Agreed. It's really strong. I enjoy how it rewards good play, strategic play, playing to players' strengths. I didn't feel that so much in 2K8. I felt like the CPU had too much rubber banding to try and be challenging. There is a little bit of that in 2K9, and I'm sure I'll get into that on the show, and I certainly get into it in my upcoming retrospective as well, but it's not as cheap. I've had some great comeback victories. I've shown you the footage of those comeback victories. So satisfying to not give up, to make that final push, to make some good plays down the stretch, and it will reward that. Reward you locking in on defense, reward you making the right moves and getting good shots on offense as well, making those two-way plays. So I'm really impressed with 2K9. It doesn't have, well, again, it has traces of the cheapness of 2K8, I feel, but it's definitely more balanced. And the balance is so important. We've talked about that before, being able to get the job done at both ends of the floor, make it feel like your input matters, not have the CPU really blatantly rubber band and cheat in order to be challenging. And you do want that challenge, which 2K9 is, but it feels a lot fairer, and that's what I've been enjoying. The authenticity as well. I'm never going to love the dribbling controls, that original isomotion, as much as the later Pro Stick that we now have, or certainly freestyle control back in the day, but I'm getting used to it. It's one of the better implementations of that old style, I feel.
And as far as rubber banding, I expect a little bit of it because in real life, momentum is real, right?
Oh, yeah.
Players
you need it
players get hot. Players try harder in the last few minutes. You have to really lock in. And if you let up, you can get taken over, right? So, I think that there's a good balance of it in that game where it doesn't feel cheap.
Yeah.
I definitely agree. I also want to point out that one of the best things about 2K9 compared to 2K8 is the action just doesn't feel as canned. I think you would agree. If you drive to the hoop on 2K9, you don't feel completely attached to another player, right? You feel like you can actually create space, like in real life, and do a realistic drive. You're not missing layups constantly. One of the biggest things I hate about NBA 2K8 is you'll have countless shots right at the rim, sometimes completely uncontested, and they'll be putting it off the front of the rim, right? Yeah. Or it's going to bounce out of the rim. And they fix that with 2K9. You get rewarded far less. I just feel like there's more authenticity in that game. And the atmosphere, too. The crowd is so into it. The commentary is so good. I'm just a really big fan of that game. And I want to point something out because it kind of goes in line with what you said about NBA 2K8. And I want people to know that Andrew wasn't alone as it relates to, not being a fan of that game. So let's go back to the IGN review, which was published in November of 2008. And the writer of that article is Nate Ahern. He states, NBA 2K9 review, a return to dominance for the time-honored series. He says, as any knowledgeable caveman will tell you, it's tough to reinvent the wheel. Some might say impossible. The developers behind the yearly stable of sports games that we all love struggle with a similar problem every season. How do you change a video game enough to make it worth $60 while still staying in the confines of the given sport? It's a lesson that 2K Sports learned the hard way last year with NBA 2K8, a game that underperformed in the eyes of most critics. And then it states, luckily NBA 2K9 is here to return to the series to its once comfortable perch atop the basketball world. While no one will argue that it's a massive overhaul from what we've seen from the series in the past, the additions that have been made advance the gameplay enough to conquer the competition. And a large portion of this review, Andrew, is about the gameplay and how great were reviews back then, right? They're a lot different today.
Detailed.
And I feel like this was a really strong review by Nate where he touches on, all the gameplay enhancements and the shortcomings as well. But yeah, you and I aren't the only ones who struggle with praising NBA 2K8 from time to time. You can read it here in the review.
Oh yeah, I didn't want to read any contemporary reviews until I'd written my retrospective of 2K8. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't subconsciously parroting anybody else's opinions, and I don't feel I have a problem with that, but I just wanted to avoid it nevertheless. And I was vindicated, I feel, to go back and see some of those reviews, see the contemporary view of 2K8, and see that they shared those criticisms. And with 2K9, my opening retrospective, I do talk about gameplay for most of the article. And that is because 2K9 doesn't make a lot of huge innovations as far as a brand new mode or a whole lot of new features. There are some nice additions to the game. The NBA.com interface in the association, that's nice. Some other little additions here and there, some changes to practice mode. Living rosters, of course, came in that year, although it resulted in a lot of 99 overalls. The legendary, mysterious 2K insider who assigned a lot of 99 overalls in that game, and some really weird individual ratings. I think Dwayne Wade has a 97 in blocking, and Wade is one of the best shot-blocking guards in NBA history. I believe he did actually surpass Michael Jordan's total to that point, but 97 is still very high. That puts him up with Hakeem Olajuwon and the all-time great shot blockers, Mark Eaton, etc., Manute Bol, Kareem, etc. So there were mistakes there. Those are nice additions, but it is mostly about fixing the gameplay, polishing the gameplay, and it shows that you can have a really big jump, a really important, strong release in the space of a year that doesn't necessarily have that big innovative new feature. That is always nice. A lot of the landmark releases do have that big new feature. But the big new feature really in 2K9, I suppose also coming to PC, that was pretty big as well, especially in our community, but really was polishing the gameplay, fixing what went wrong in 2K8, and course correcting from a bit of a misstep.
Well, first off, I want to say that Michael Jordan has a higher single season block total than Wade ever had in his career. Michael Jordan had 131, and he also had 125 in another season. Wade's highest was 106. Yeah, exactly. And those were in back-to-back seasons. And yeah, gameplay is paramount. And, further on the review, IGN says the biggest changes, surprisingly enough, actually do come on the court. It's a welcome switch for a genre that so often rests on its laurels. NBA 2K8 was home to plenty of issues, including gameplay that felt a step too slow and a newly adapted defensive mechanic that nearly broke the game. I hate playing defense in that game. In NBA 2K8, I just hate the always being attached to somebody. He continues, lockdown defense is back again, but it's been changed for the better. Shaq can no longer guard Steve Nash by simply slamming down on the left trigger. He goes on to say one issue that has also been corrected for NBA 2K9 is that of missing shots that pro players should be making. And this is still an issue with like the newest NBA 2K games, right?
Oh, yeah.
This happened all too often on drives to the basket or shots from within 10 feet. And that's what I was alluding to earlier. Whenever I play NBA 2K8, I miss a ton of shots right near the rim that are mostly wide open. And these are pro basketball players. It's like the game engine is designed to make you miss a certain amount of times in a game, right? Depending on which level you're on, and it doesn't matter where you are on the court. He continues, this season is the first time where 2K Sports seems to have gotten the skills of the players right. Kobe and LeBron are going to score their points. There's little that you can do to stop that from happening. This game realizes that, and while it doesn't take defense out of the equation entirely, there's much more leeway on hitting some of those tough jumpers. Build up some momentum and you'll really see buckets start to drop. They rated NBA 2K9 an 8, which is great. And Andrew and I are considering using the Bulls for our season on NBA 2K9. And I know this is one of your favorite Bulls teams, Andrew. It's Derrick Rose and Ben Gordon and Luol Deng. And no Boozer there yet. It's actually Drew Gooden there at power forward. But we have Joakim Noah at center. And we have Larry Hughes coming off the bench, who, by the way, was traded halfway through that season. But you get him in the opening night rosters. But they have Kirk Heinrich on that team, Captain Kirk, who both of us absolutely love. They have Tyrus Thomas for defense and for throwing it down around the rim and whatnot. So it's a really fun Bulls team, and I certainly wouldn't mind using them. One thing that was surprising to me is that 08-09, which is what that season, what those rosters are based off of, that is Derrick Rose rookie year, right? That doesn't change how effective he is in the game. Andrew and I played today, and we were 17 for 20 from the field with Derrick Rose, and he had 37 points. And he was awesome. We were getting steals with him all over the court. We were throwing it down in transition and in traffic. I hit a 3 with him from the top of the key. Kind of nice that they made a rookie that effective in a video game.
Kind of prophetic. I mean, that he was playing like Prime Rose first, quite frankly. Getting out of the break, like you said, throwing down those dunks, slicing into the lane, hitting some tough layups and reverse layups. Yeah, it's really hard to go past that 2009 Bulls team. Such a what-if, obviously. Gordon and Rose together. Wish that happened longer. They let Gordon walk for nothing. His career did go downhill after that, and there are reasons that he's gone into with personal issues and so forth that he's talked about on the Players Tribune before, and that was a very interesting read to hear about some of that stuff. But the move to Detroit definitely didn't work out for either team, didn't help the Bulls. They really could have used his shooting with Derrick Rose. They didn't have that consistent outside scorer. No, Keith Bogans doesn't count in the 2011 season. I'm just imagining Prime Rose and Ben Gordon there. I mean, there's still that injury that happens in 2012. Who knows? But yeah, they really needed that scoring punch with Gordon. That, just what could have been if they just didn't let him walk for nothing. And they even brought in Kyle Korver to be that outside scorer, and they let him walk as well. So Garpax definitely flubbed that one. But very interesting underdog Bulls team. They did make the playoffs, of course, lost to your Celtics in one of the most epic first-round series in playoff history. I think we would all agree on that. But yes, I mean, exciting pieces there. And Tyrus Thomas, a great what-if. I was there at the 2007 draft, of course, when he got picked by the Blazers and then traded for LaMarcus Aldridge. The Bulls actually drafted LaMarcus Aldridge and could have had him and maybe should have kept him, quite frankly. But Tyrus Thomas, great in video games.
Yeah. So about Ben Gordon, what was one of the greatest things to watch during that Celtics Bulls series? It was Ben Gordon rising up from all over the floor and hitting that beautiful jump shot, right? He was a tremendous athlete, tremendous jump shooter. And we kind of got those feels with NBA 2K9, right? Because they have a pretty good looking shot for him, and it's that high release, and he's getting up off the floor. And in the game that we played, it felt pretty authentic there, right? Shooting with him, and that was nice. The Bulls also did make an improvement. So the Bulls in 07-08, which is the season that was just played before 2K9 came out, they went 33 and 49. And then in Rose's rookie year, they had pretty good improvement. They actually went 41 and 41, Andrew, and they were second in the Central Division. So that is a marked improvement. So obviously, Rose was already making a difference at that point. But that might be the team that we use for 2K9.
Before we go on, a reminder that the NLSC podcast comes out every week on the NLSC, nba-live.com, as well as our YouTube channel. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast apps. If you're listening on any of those apps, we'd greatly appreciate a review. To keep up with the show and everything we're doing with basketball gaming in general, connect with us on social media. On Twitter and Facebook, we are the NLSC. We also have an Instagram, NLSC Basketball, and on YouTube, we're youtube.com/NBA Live Series Center. Once again, visit us at nba-live.com, where in addition to the podcast, you'll also find all of our original content, as well as our forum and modding community.
But NBA Live 09, we used the Portland Trailblazers, and this was actually your idea. You said, this is intriguing. This is a what-if team. Greg Oden is there, and it's Greg Oden and LaMarcus Aldridge and Brandon Roy and Martell Webster slotted in at the small forward. You have Travis Outlaw that you can sub in for him off of the bench. Starting point guard on that team is actually Steve Blake, who at least gives you some three-point shooting and some decent passing. And you have Jared Bayless on the bench. And Rafe LaFrentz is on that roster, even though he didn't play in 08-09. He actually retired after the 07-08 season, never played another NBA game. But he's there in the opening night roster. But if you don't want to put him on the floor, you have Prisbilla there and whatnot for some shot blocking. But the Portland team is very intriguing. And one of the reasons why, I think you would agree, is that NBA Live 09 has a very strong post game.
Yes, own the paint.
So much better than NBA Live 10. It has the best post game, probably tied maybe with NBA Live 06 for the 360, because I think that's one thing that they did right. They brought that post game over from, the PS2 era NBA Lives, and I think it worked pretty well. I love getting in the post and doing half hooks and spinning either way in NBA Live 06. But the post game in NBA Live 09 is solid, so that's intriguing because you're throwing up little hooks with Oden. You loved that drop step that I did with LaMarcus Aldridge into a one-handed jam. You can do little post fadeaways, etc. You can feel like damn Kevin McHale down there.
Oh yeah, up and unders. I love the up and unders.
And whatnot. Yeah, they're great. Yeah. And sometimes there's good mechanics in the game where the player is smart, and if he doesn't have room and he's under the basket, he'll try to finish on the other side of the rim and stuff. It's really cool. And then we're also out there, with Brandon Roy. So we have our wing scorer. We have our guy we can go one-on-one with, a guy who can stretch the floor but also take it to the rack. Brandon Roy could also post up as well. So you can, pick on smaller players and whatnot. And then they have shooting. So Portland in the 07-08 season, so the season that had just finished, went 41 and 41. And then in 08-09, Portland went 54 and 28, and they were actually tied for division lead in the Northwest Division with the Denver Nuggets. But I don't think either of these teams are bandwagon jumping. right? I think both of these teams would be fair to use against the PC in a season and whatnot. So yeah, I'm thinking maybe Portland might be the choice.
Yeah, I played a game of 2K9 with Portland, so I'd be up for using them in either game. And that what-if aspect is so tantalizing. You've got Greg Oden, who was a very talented player. If only he could have stayed on the court, if only he could have stayed healthy. Would he have necessarily been a dominant big? I don't know, but I think he could have been a very good big at that time. And Brandon Roy, he did have some all-star seasons, but the knees, having no cartilage in his knees and just wearing down and having to retire because of that, such a shame. But that what-if aspect is so good for retro gaming, so appealing for retro gaming, because you can play out that alternate history. You can use those players that were missing so many games and not have to deal with those injuries and rewrite history. So I'm really drawn to that what-if aspect. And with Own the Paint, having Aldridge, having Oden, yeah, that's a really strong vote for NBA Live 09. Though it is still fun in 2K9 as well. I really did enjoy my session with 2K9 and the Blazers. So yeah, the Blazers did jump out to me as a possible candidate.
Yeah, and you have a special connection with Greg Oden because you bumped into him in the elevator.
Of course,
right?
As I said last week, yes.
When you and when you were at the community event with the EA. Yeah, so let me get into what IGN said about NBA Live 09 in their review. It wasn't reviewed too well. They state the DNA of this year's game is still stuck with long-standing genetic issues. And this review was written by Jeff Haynes. The game got a 6.5, which they called okay at the time, but it states NBA Live has been having quite a run of bad luck over the past few years with gameplay elements that were simply flawed in execution or completely unrealistic to the sport. Sounds like NBA Live 07, Andrew. As a result, there's been a concerted effort to remake the entire franchise and streamline many of the mechanics that have gotten out of control. And just a reminder to people, this was Mike Wong's first game with EA Sports, NBA Live. He worked on NBA Live 09, then worked on NBA Live 10, and then was back with 2K for 2K11. He continues, while last year's title was the strongest the franchise has been in a while, ultimately it was still disappointing. This year, EA Sports has chosen to go completely back to basics, focusing on elements like low post play as well as pick and rolls. Both are very strong in that game. They did a great job with both of those features. It's also tried to focus on the stats of the game with its new dynamic DNA system, which attempts to present the action on the court the way that it plays in the NBA. While these decisions for the game are laudable, the implementation of many features feels incomplete when you hit the court for tip-off. And then he continues a little bit later and states another mechanic that works well is the low post play, which has been solid for 2 years running now. In last year's game, you really could focus on working on the blocks, putting a body on your opponent to knock them out of position before going up for an easy two. This year, the low post has been slightly refined with an easier spin move by flicking the right analog stick for spin moves, or performing a drop step by holding another button and flicking the analog stick, which is what you saw me do with LaMarcus Aldridge. He continues, it's extremely satisfying to work the ball down to the low post, back down a defender, fake the shot, and when he bites on the fake, you pull off a spin to the bucket. So I want to point out that I said this to you in our Twitter chat. I said, the more I play NBA Live 09, I'm not sure that I enjoy Live 10 more. Right? I think that NBA Live 09 is definitely a little bit more janky with the movement, a little herky-jerky, right? A little bit more robotic, but I'm a really big fan of good post-game physics. I'm a very big fan of, working inside the three-point line. And, I've been getting my fix with that with NBA Live 09, and oftentimes I can't with Live 10. I think those games are pretty even to me right now, if not NBA Live 09 being a little bit ahead as far as what I want to play right now.
Oh, I see it. And I do like the rebounding better in Live 10, the dribbling as well. Also the play movement, they refined that a little more. They added all those signature running styles, a lot more signature animations in NBA Live 10, and some other polish here and there. But alley-oops are broken in Live 10. We did get it to work in our most recent session with NBA Live 10. An amazing amount of alley-oops for that game, but Live 09 is so much better in that regard. In the session of NBA Live 09 that we just had some really nice lobs, actually. So there are definitely strengths to NBA Live 09, a few steps backwards in NBA Live 10, polish in other areas. But no, I see what you mean as far as them being very even. And that IGN review is kind of harsh, I think. I see where he's coming from, obviously, and Live was definitely struggling at that time and struggling to rebuild, so I don't think reviewers were giving the game as much leeway. It definitely needed to catch up to what 2K was doing, so I do understand the harsh criticism, but at the same time, I do think Live 09 is a bit more fun on the sticks than he said. I think Dynamic DNA was a big deal. I think that was a bit bigger. I think he was kind of underselling Dynamic DNA there, being able to push through those updates, made fresh daily, as it was, pushing through those tendencies, pushing through those roster updates, I think was a big deal. And you look at what they were doing there, and you look at what 2K9 was doing there, and I recently saw a comment, Derek, that said NBA 2K was more fun when it was an arcade game. And it has never been an arcade game for a start. Certainly not by my definition of what an arcade basketball game is. But you look at what these two really strong releases were doing. You look at all the strong releases in NBA Live or NBA 2K history, and they are striving for realism. They are taking a fun approach to it. They're not going so authentic to the point of, oh, we can only have a few dunks per game, so it's not fun that way. There are some liberties with what is totally realistic as far as some of the numbers, some of the action, more dunks. Maybe the shooting percentages are a bit higher game to game as well. But they are going for sim, and Live 09 and 2K9 were both going for sim, and they are so much better for it.
Yeah, I think that instead of calling it arcade, maybe you can call it loose sim. Something like that.
I guess, yeah. It's a better way of putting it.
But it's still a sim basketball title,
absolutely.
Right? I mean, it's real NBA teams. It's 5-on-5. It's all NBA rules. It's signature shots for the players. It's, signature moves. It's, trying to make them like they play in real life and whatnot. It's still sim basketball. You stated made fresh daily, which was the tagline for the Dynamic DNA. In the verdict, he mentions that. So his verdict for the game was, while the concept of NBA Live, quote, made fresh daily, end quote, is a good one, there are plenty of elements that make the gameplay feel stale or incomplete. He states the low post play and pick and roll features work great, but they're countered by a lackluster lockdown defense and odd tempo issues that hamper gameplay.
That is kind of fair.
He states that yeah, I mean, that's fair.
Yeah.
Right.
He
states the Dynamic DNA, which can't fully be engaged for another few weeks at that time, still has a number of issues with displaying useful info or elements that fully aid the player. Other elements, such as Be a Pro, are obviously frameworks for a deeper mode that haven't fully been implemented yet. NBA Live 09 does have some solid moments here and there, but you'll have to fight your way through a number of inconsistent elements to fully enjoy everything it has to offer. I would say that the biggest strengths in NBA Live 09 is the atmosphere, right? The atmosphere and the presentation. I think the game pops graphically. I think the crowd is really into the action. I think that the commentary is excellent. It's great for all of that stuff. I think the right stick dribbling with the improved hesitations and crossovers and whatnot, the things you can do in the triple threat, I think the right stick usage is incredibly strong in NBA Live 09, and it's fun. I love the post play. I love running pick and rolls and pick and pops in that game and whatnot. And I feel like getting steals, it can be fun at times when you're not constantly being forced into bump animations with the offensive player. So I think overall NBA Live 09 is probably higher than a 6.5 for me. I would probably give it more like a 7.5.
Agreed.
Or close to an 8. But I do see where he's coming from with some of his comments.
And of course, there was also the NBA Live Academy that year, the new onboarding mode, and it was also a way to train players through actual drills in Dynasty, which is new. That was a nice addition to Dynasty that year after the Push Dynasty revamp in NBA Live 08. So they were starting to put a bit more effort into those modes, and I certainly missed that. Be a Pro, what a missed opportunity, I will say. That was basically, in the Xbox 360 and PS3 version, that was simply a practice mode for the new online team play, or the original online team play, I should say. Online team play, of course, coming to NBA Live 08 post-release in a patch, was there by default in Live 09. In those modes, originally you would take control of NBA players rather than a My Player, no career mode, or the one player, as Live has had in recent years, Rising Star, no career mode avatars, obviously, so you take control of an NBA player. You could choose to switch between players if there was less than 5 users aside, but anyway, it was building up to what we have now with online team play. And people do forget that Live innovated that, or certainly innovated a form of online team play in that way. But Be a Pro in the PS2 version of NBA Live 09 is actually a fully fledged, I say fully fledged, it's still fairly bare bones, but it is a proper single-season career mode. It's a one-game practice mode for online team play in the next-gen version, but that last-gen version for PS2 got this single-season career mode. Kind of wild, but Live didn't follow through with that, and they did take All-Star Weekend out in Live 10, and they didn't put in that career mode, whereas NBA 2K10 brought in My Player, the first iteration of my career. So NBA Live definitely made a few missteps at that time, even as they were getting back into the game. And of course, NBA Elite 11, we don't even need to go into that at the moment. We could do a whole show on that, obviously. But yeah, funny to think that they did have that full mode, such as it was, in the prior gen version, but not the next gen version or the current gen version, however you want to put it. But no, I'd agree. It's harsh, but not totally unfair. I'd put it more at 7.5 myself, and I certainly do enjoy it. I do like the dribbling controls, obviously, more than NBA 2K9. I'm always going to opt for that right stick dribbling over any iteration of isomotion that doesn't use the right stick, as it didn't until NBA 2K13, of course. But 2K9 just has a lot more authenticity, a bit more of a looser feel on the court as well. There are some moments in Live 09 where you get caught in animations. I tried to do a catch and shoot on the perimeter with Brandon Roy, and as you know, Derek, I ended up doing a wild turnaround fadeaway from three-point range. It was supposed to be a catch and shoot, going along the baseline, coming up the screen, and catch and shoot, but it just didn't work out.
That happens sometimes with Live 10 too, though.
Yes.
Remember, and when I was doing the NLSC NBA Live 10 tournament, I saw Delonte West hit a bunch of those where, it's part of the same motion system. And you mentioned NBA Live 09 for PS2. I also wanted to point out that back in the 2000s and early 2010s, some of these video game reviews were more loose and more fun. This is how the IGN NBA Live 09 PS2 review starts. It says, "You could build a mansion big enough to house each of Sean Kemp's illegitimate children with all these bricks." So, yeah, that wouldn't fly today.
No.
Probably not. But back then, the writer also states, "The speculation last year was that NBA Live 08 would be the series' last dance on the PS2, mercifully ending the franchise's run on the console after the once proud title had spent several seasons on the decline. However, that speculation was, much to our dismay, incorrect. The folks at EA Sports have seen fit to grace us with NBA Live 09. So as you can imagine, I actually love it. It was very interesting to read this review, and I'm glad these reviews are still up. But yeah, Andrew and I won both of our games today. It was a lot of fun. Before we close the show, Andrew, I wanted to give people an idea of how different the NBA was back then. Andrew and I want to make it a point that we were huge fans still of the NBA at this time. One thing that's super notable, so both in 07, 08, and 08, 09, the average three-point attempts per team was 18.1. Today, it's 37.5. That is a monster difference, Andrew. That means over double the amount of threes are going up each game today in comparison to what was going up back in the late 2000s. So you had more variety in the game. We were talking about the post earlier. You had more use in the post, more usage in the mid-range, more rim attacks, all of that stuff. And yeah, we were huge fans of the NBA at that time. And for 07-08, which is the season that had just finished, the top 10 scorers were LeBron, Kobe, Allen Iverson, Carmelo Anthony, Amare Stoudemire, Dwayne Wade, Kevin Martin. Let's not forget, he had a couple strong seasons. He averaged actually 23.7 and was seventh in the league in scoring that year. I had that awkward shooting for him, but it was super effective. Number 8 was Dirk Nowitzki. 9 was Michael Redd, and 10 was Richard Jefferson. And then in 08-09, a couple interesting names here. Kevin Martin's in here again at number 7, Andrew. But leading the league in scoring was Wade. Then it was LeBron in second. Third was Kobe. Fourth was Dirk. Fifth was Danny Granger. I don't think people remember how good he was before his injuries and whatnot. It was his age 25 season, and he averaged 25.8. Kevin Durant was in sixth. Kevin Martin again at 7, Al Jefferson, Andrew, at 8 with Minnesota in his age 24 season with 23.1 points per game, obviously post KG trade and, being a feature on that Minnesota team. And 9th was Chris Paul and 10th was Carmelo Anthony. Yeah, definitely a different time in the NBA, but we were huge fans of the NBA at that time.
And that is something that we want to stress, because with all this, we're done with the 90s nonsense. Assumes that people our age and slightly older who were watching the NBA at that time gave up on the league after the 90s and haven't enjoyed anything since then, and that is certainly not the case. Indeed, I am waiting for people to start discrediting the 2000s to prop up today, and that's going to end up discrediting the first half of LeBron's career. We'll see how they jump through some hoops and tie themselves in knots to justify that. But yeah, definitely an interesting time in the NBA. Loved seeing the Bulls rise during that decade, and of course, get Derrick Rose and the promise that was happening at that time. And again, wish he had been able to play with Ben Gordon for longer, but such is life. And Danny Granger, it's interesting because he did overlap with the Paul George era. They were teammates, and it looked like they were going to be a bit of a duo on the wings there for a while, and then Granger's injuries, unfortunately, derailed his career and prematurely ended it, in fact, and was traded just a few years later after that. But I believe his 25.8 points per game is the highest in Pacers history since the ABA era. I remember that from writing an article a little while back and being surprised by that, because I was sure that Reggie Miller had a higher scoring average at some point, or Jermaine O'Neal for that matter. But yeah, Danny Granger, one of the top scorers in Pacers history, at least very briefly.
Yeah, like I said, I think people forget. And same with Kevin Martin. How often do you hear him brought up?
The league moves on very quickly, yeah.
It really does. So, Andrew, I did ask the community, basketball gamers, which game do you like better? NBA 2K9 or NBA Live 09? Also, which team was your favorite to use from these games? So we did receive a response on Twitter. T. Gentry at Bucky T states, I like the gameplay of NBA 2K9 better, but Live 09 was indeed a big improvement over Live 08. I also enjoy putting on the FIBA teams in Live 09, underrated feature there. He also states, I love playing with the Bulls, Rookie Rose, and the Melo Iverson-led Nuggets in 2K9. For Live 09, I like playing with Denver also. Yeah, I can't get past those Nuggets teams, Andrew. They're one of my favorites. Obviously, in 08-09 in real life, they ended up shipping Iverson out to Detroit. They ended up getting Billups, and they obviously made that strong playoff run. But in the default roster for 2K9, there they are, right? That's their, when you picked up the game, it was Melo and Iverson on the Nuggets, and they have Nene and Kenyon Martin and J.R. Smith, and they're such a fun video game team. I don't blame him for wanting to throw that team on the floor.
And I know you're a big fan of those Iverson Nuggets. Absolutely.
He was still so good.
Yeah,
he was still putting up numbers, right? I mean, they didn't get the success that they wanted, but he was still fun to watch.
And you saw his shooting percentage rise when he's actually playing with another star that would draw attention on offense. Melo, obviously. You could see what Iverson could do if he wasn't forced to carry the load for a short-handed team.
Moving over to Discord, QB1120 states, I hate to admit it, but the PS3 era was where 2K surpassed Live. We had 2K7 on Xbox 360 on display at the store I worked at, and I was blown away. That was the first and only time I bought a 2K game and it felt weird. Between the two of these games, I did own Live 09 and played as the Hornets because CP3 was my favorite player. I would say I have Live 09 and 2K9 as a tie right now for me from an enjoyment level, right? Like I think that they're equally enjoyable for me. And that's why I thought it would be a good idea maybe for us to start a season on both.
Oh, absolutely. And look, if you're doing an objective rating and rating all the positives and negatives and the depth of the games, and of course, Live 09 has the FIBA teams, 2K9 has Legends, NBA Legends, so that's nice. That's something that NBA Live lost when they made the jump to the 7th generation, which was just ridiculous. They brought Legends in Live 2000 and did a pretty good job for the first few years and then just went away from that. Not a good move at all for Live. A lot of mistakes during that era. It is why 2K was able to overtake them during the 7th generation, as Q said. And yeah, I agree. I'm enjoying them both pretty equally at the moment. 2K9 is probably about it really. Technically the better game, but I do enjoy Live 09 just as much. I did play Live 09 back in the day more, but retroactively, as a retro gaming experience, yeah, pretty on par. So we also had our listeners weigh in on Facebook as well. Tyler, RH, and Lons all say 2K9. Philip says Live. Daniel says, played Live back until Live died, and then I had no choice. I was very lucky that I really enjoyed the 2K game of that year. I think it was 2K13. Well, I can certainly relate to getting into 2K finally and properly being able to enjoy it with 2K13, bringing in that right stick dribbling as Live had for so many years at that point. 10 years at that point, in fact. So that was such an important move for the 2K series. And yeah, a lot of people were very loyal to Live until the end, Eric.
Yeah. And like I said, the turning point for my brothers and I was NBA Live 07, not only because the game was just a disaster from a gameplay perspective, but it was the fact that they took away the ability to control multiple teams in a season mode. So we couldn't do our fantasy drafts using multiple teams and be our opponents every game, etc. They killed that portion of the series at the time, and that's when we officially moved to the 2K series with 2K7, and that's when TJ Ford became a video game legend, etc. So and we looked at NBA Live 09 and made sure that for the PS3 version that we could play co-op in Dynasty, and you are able to do that. However, you can't be each other's opponents. And I think that these design choices by EA Sports over the years, as it relates to the local experience, right? As it relates to multiplayer capabilities in a franchise / Dynasty / season mode. I think they've been making big mistakes. I think they've been very short-sighted. I think that the developers don't understand how often people use those features or want to take multiple teams into a season or want to have that co-op or head-to-head experience and whatnot in those types of modes. And I think it just goes back to what we've said before, is they've removed so much of the depth that made them popular, right? They removed so much of the depth that made the series stand out and that, made it so it appealed to more gamers and whatnot. And that stuff started happening with NBA Live 06 on Xbox 360.
Definitely.
Right? And they have really screwed it up ever since. As far as the features that I was just talking about, those have never been as strong as they were in, NBA Live 2004. As they were in NBA Live 2003, even NBA Live 2000, Andrew, and whatnot. So, yeah, stop removing features. And, if NBA Live comes back, bring a lot of that stuff back, because people want to have that depth. They want to have these options and whatnot. And that's why 2K still appeals to so many gamers. There's just so much to do, Andrew, in the 2K games. Even with NBA 2K25, sure, somebody might have their gripes with the gameplay. Sure, somebody might have their gripes with the microtransactions, with the gambling mechanics and whatnot. But at the end of the day, they try to make it so there's something in there for everybody, right? And the depth in the 2K series with like NBA 2K25 and the recent 2Ks and whatnot, it is massive. It is awesome. And so, yeah, hopefully if EA Sports comes back at some point with the NBA Live series, they learn.
Definitely. It's been such a strength for NBA 2K, such a weakness for NBA Live, as you said, for way too long, neglecting the basics, neglecting the depth alike. And of course, by neglecting some of the basics, you do lose some of the depth as well, even if it is an option like being able to control multiple teams in the franchise and season modes, or being able to play head-to-head in those modes, etc. Just basic stuff that we had way back in the 90s, and that's the thing that hurts, is that we've had this stuff in the games. Much more primitive games have had so many more features, and we saw NBA Live in its golden age, and even in its second golden age, as I've called it, that mid-2000s, up to Live 06 PC, adding more and more depth each and every year, innovating, adding more content, bringing in the legends, bringing in retro jerseys and the ability to select different jerseys, instead of just having the secondary jerseys randomly selected in exhibition mode or the Sunday games in franchise and season mode. Adding all that depth, adding all those extra features, bringing in the new modes. They were the first one to have franchise mode, the first basketball game to have franchise mode. But look what 2K has done, taking the idea and just run with it all the way to my NBA eras, multiple starting points in history. Incredible. Now, if NBA Live was to come back in the next couple of years, are they going to catch up with depth? No. They're not going to be able to match that in a couple of years. They're not going to be able to have all the legends. I assume some of them, Michael Jordan in particular, are going to be exclusive to 2K, so that is an issue, but you still do the best you can, and we want that to happen. Because you look at what happens with having competition, two strong alternatives, two viable alternatives, even if one is ultimately better than the other, if the other one is playable, enjoyable, viable, having those options in the space is so important. So, yeah, it's a real shame that Live innovated for so many years and then has just gone back on what made it so fantastic and made it the premier sim game for so many years, right up until Live 2000, really. I've seen some people say the original NBA 2K puts Live 2000 to shame. One person did respond to a post I made on the NLSC's X account calling Live 2000 the best sim game of the 90s, and they said no, it was 2K. Now, that person actually did work on 2K. They were part of the original development team for 2K. So, Marcus, I do respect your support for your series. All these years later, I do respect the loyalty. I do also respectfully disagree. Live 2000 was the better sim game. That's not to say 2K was a bad game. Just Live 2000 was more realistic, in my opinion. But yeah, Live really did go away from what made them so fantastic, and 2K just ran with that, and was never more apparent than during the 7th generation.
Yeah, for the last 20 plus years for the NBA Live series, especially since NBA Live 06 for the 360, the wrong people have been making decisions for EA Sports. The wrong people have been put in charge of, all different areas as it relates to the depth, to the gameplay, etc. They're not listening to the right people. They don't know what the consumer wants, and that is incredibly obvious. And I don't need to be somebody who can create video games to see that, right? I can see the responses from the people. I can see the way that the games are made, the stuff that was taken out, all of that stuff. So, hopefully, someday we'll get a true competitor in the space, because I think gamers deserve that.
Not sure if I've ever mentioned it on the show before, but at the Live 16 community event, I did bring it up that, hey, this game doesn't have roster editing still, 3 games into this new generation. There are people in the community saying, if this doesn't have roster editing and other basics, I'm not going to buy it. And some of the people that I was talking to, the developers and the, at the time, community manager, were like, oh, wow, we didn't realize that. So that was kind of concerning. And they did bring it back in Live 18 as a post-release update, which was one of the biggest, best updates, one of the best patches I've seen for a game post-release to add roster editing, and ironically some of the deepest roster editing that Live has ever had in that post-release patch. But it goes to show that they didn't have the right vision, or they weren't realizing that vision quick enough. So that was kind of concerning to hear at the time.
How can you not see it?
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's common sense. Even if nobody was saying anything, you should know not to avoid that depth.
Live 95 had it.
You should know. Yeah, exactly.
And one final response here from MC says 2K9 and 2K pennies still plays randomly in my mind more than I care to admit. LOL. And yeah, that's one of the fantastic things about video game nostalgia, isn't it, Derek? You obviously remember the gameplay, because gameplay is paramount. You remember the modes and all the fun you had, but also the graphics, the aesthetic, the vibe, the music, the soundtrack. And yeah, 2K pennies is the track that, the title track, I guess, for 2K9 plays when you fire it up. So yeah, I totally get that. With all of my all-time favorites, Derek, I certainly do remember the music from those games.
Yeah, not only the music, but just like the atmosphere on the court, right? Yep.
Commentary.
The reactions to dunks, right? The crowd noise during important parts of the game, the chants, all of that stuff. And you sent me a clip of a game winner you hit with Al Thornton, and just the reaction from the crowd, the reaction from the announcers. It was all fitting. It was incredibly exciting. And on the basket that you hit before that, in order to pull the game closer with Baron Davis and whatnot, it felt like I was watching real NBA highlights, right? And a big moment. And they did such a good job with the 2K series at that time. 2K10 has that same atmosphere, just getting you roped into it, getting you immersed and whatnot. So that was cool.
Yeah, it's always so much better when that virtual commentary actually reacts to the action and that it realizes that it is a clutch situation or something very exciting has happened. I did submit a highlight for the top 10 recently that was number 1 that week, the dive and the overhead shot from the floor with my player, and that was very exciting to pull off, finally. I've been trying to actually manufacture that situation in my career for a while with my steals and taking that dive and shooting from the floor. So yeah, that was quite satisfying, but the commentary kind of let me down in that moment. And that's unusual for 2K14.
Yeah, somebody else pointed that out too, where it was acting like it was a regular shot. It's like A-Train for 2 or something like that. It's like, no, this guy just made a shot from about 18 feet away from the basket, sitting on the floor, and threw it over his head, and it was nothing but net. That requires a much bigger response and whatnot. But yeah, no, 2K14 also has great atmosphere, both for the PS3 PC version, Xbox 360 version, but also for Xbox One, PS4.
So I guess my conclusion here, Derek, is that 2K9 is technically the better game. It's the stronger, deeper game across the board. A lot of authenticity, although NBA Live 09 was certainly striving for that as well. You don't put features like dynamic DNA, powered by Synergy Sports, powered by actual NBA statistical data if you're not trying to be sim. So no, Live was not being arcade at that time. Neither was 2K. But I do enjoy them pretty equally at the moment. Very drawn to both of them. I would absolutely be up for playing a season in both with you. I think that'd be a lot of fun. It'd be really fun to compare and play with different teams in both games and see how each of them stack up and see which one we end up enjoying more, although we probably will end up enjoying them pretty much equally. But in the meantime, Derek, of course, we throw it over to the community. Keep the discussion going. Let us know which game you prefer. NBA Live 09, NBA 2K9, which teams you play with, and hey, throw out some more suggestions for us as well.
Yeah, and I would agree. NBA 2K9, I think, is an overall better product. I think it's a lot deeper, right? I think that there is more signature style in the game as it relates to signature animations and whatnot. I think that the pace is often a bit better, a little bit too much crab dribble looking. NBA Live 09, would you say? Maybe a little bit like pushing the ball up the floor and whatnot. Little janky still and whatnot. I think that, though, at the end of the day, especially right now, I'm enjoying those games equally. I think that they're both strong on-court performers. And if I had to rate the games, I would have probably given 2K9 an 8.0 and Live 09 maybe a 7.5, right? So they're close. But yeah, to the community, keep an eye out on the NLSC YouTube, because you're going to see highlights going up possibly frequently from both of those games.
It's going to be a lot of fun, whichever way we go, whichever team we choose. And once again, open to suggestions in the meantime, assuming that we don't pick one before this episode comes out. But yeah, it's a much closer battle than NBA Live 07 and NBA 2K7. NBA 2K7 wins that one very easily. Not even going to joke about 07 being the better game. That's just disrespectful. And also, 2K9 and 09, pleasing improvements on the year before.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And like I said, I don't hate 2K8. I think it can be a strong performer sometimes on the court. But now you see what I was saying about NBA 2K9, right?
Definitely.
Now you know why I rated it as high as I did. I think there were a lot of improvements.
Rising up my rankings as well. I'm not sure where I'd put it just yet. It's still early days in my retro kick and obviously looking to play it a lot more. But yeah, I think it's going to end up being one of my favorites as well. I do see that. So thank you once again to everybody who responded to Derek's question and weighed in on this debate. Once again, please keep the discussion going, throw out those suggestions for teams to use, and let us know which game you prefer. With that being said, that has brought us to the end of this week's show. As always, thank you for tuning in, and please join us again next week, and every week, on the NLSC, nb-live.com, our YouTube channel, or wherever you listen to podcasts. In the meantime, make sure you're following us on social media. That's where you can get in touch with us, and of course, stay up to date with all of our content. So, Derek, go ahead and plug the handles.
Yeah, you can reach me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at D for3G and at D for384. I'm also on the NLSC, D for3, and on YouTube, D for3.
As for me, I'm Andrew in the forum and Andrew NLSC on X and Blue Sky. The NLSC is on X, Facebook, and Blue Sky at the NLSC. We're also NLSC Basketball on Instagram and Threads. We're on YouTube at NBA Live Series Center. And of course, keep it locked to the NLSC itself, nb-live.com, for everything we do for basketball video games. So, thank you once again for tuning in, and until next time, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Derek.
Go get buckets, everyone!